people who later invented Kit Kats. They had a little grocery store near long before that. Our main high street is on the right now, Parliament Street.
Parliament Street, yeah.
And looming over is on the right are the gargoyles of All Saints Church. Its massive lantern tower. The tower on the right would be lit with a fire like a beacon in medieval times. And that was for people in the dark countryside trying to find their way to town by night. Viking Centre is very close to here. That is the Copgate shopping area. Straight in front of us is a narrow street that slopes down to the Riverside Promenade, the famous pub in York, with all these floods on the hills. It's called the King's Arms. It's not flooded at the moment. If you fancy a drink by the river, you'll be able to see the marks on the walls where the floodwaters have risen in the past. Street on the left takes you to the Cocoa Works Chocolate Cafe, where you can get money off with your bus ticket, just down there to the left. On the right of us, the Grand Opera House. Also on the right of us, the York Dungeons, and the old Victorian Library building. Next on the right is the Victorian Courtroom. From 1890, still used to be. So we've got another landmark coming up on the left now, Clifford's Tower. Clifford's Tower on your left, the most visible part of a much bigger castle. And this is one of our landmarks. This is also the last bus stop in the town centre for half an hour. So after this we head out to hidden and secret bits of York. This is the last stop in the centre for half an hour. Clifford's Tower is on your left. From this bus stop you can also cross the road, go through the gates on the right and get down to Riverside Baths. Catch a boat up and down the river as well. 100-year-old tower, still got its toilet chute on the right hand side over the corner, next to the flagpole. That is the 500-year-old toilet at Fishergate Boston Tower. Now behind this hedgerow on your left is buried a very famous criminal called Dick Turpin. And as we turn the corner, you'll be able to look to the left and into the graveyard. So on your left now, all the way to the back, there's only one stone still standing up, and it's the grave of Dick Turpin, the famous highwayman. And he used to rob people at gunpoint. He was also a horse thief and a murderer. Very nasty person who committed most of his crimes down in Essex, where he was from. But he was hiding out up north under a false name, late on in his career as it turned out. Hiding out up in Yorkshire, stealing horses, and that was enough to get him arrested and held in the castle jail and sentenced to death. And in 1739, Turpin was executed out near the racecourse, where there's a horse racing going on today. But you would gather and watch a public execution for hundreds of years in that part of town. And Dick Turpin was executed in 1739. His body was put on display in a local pub, and then loads of stories have been told about Dick Turpin over the years, and later turned into movies as well. The reality is he was a very dangerous, nasty person. On the right of us, a medieval house, long way out of town this, and it was a medieval house that later became a Victorian guest house and is now a haunted office. Straight in front of us, we can now start to see Warmgate Bar Tower. This is the third of four main towers in the city walls. This particular tower, it's a very long way out of town now. It's about as far out of the centre as you can get on the city walls, and it is a good place to stop for a drink if you're doing the full walk around the walls, because inside that tower in front of us is a cafe. You can see some people on top of the tower, and then that's because there's chairs and tables up there as well. So you can get inside the tower, the gatekeeper's lodge. You can get onto the top of it as well. when the cafe's open. Cafe not usually open on a Sunday, so probably not open tomorrow, but it is open generally for the rest of the week. We've got a bus stop here if you want to visit the cafe or get on the city walls, but it's a very long walk back into town for you, so you're better off catching the bus again or walking around the walls afterwards. Notice there's a little grey cat sitting on the ledge, on the white part of the tower over the middle archway. It's one of the 25 cats on the York Cat Trail. Horse model that they've had up there in about 200 or 300 years. An old Georgian coaching inn. Lots of inns in this area because there used to be a massive cattle market around here, and traders would come from all over the north, including Scotland, to trade their cattle, and they would stay for several days while this market went on. So there were lots of taverns and inns built in this area for them to stay in, but later on becoming pubs and guest houses. And this pub on your right, the Edinburgh Arms, is where the Beatles stayed 4 times. They played a theatre 4 times. They stayed here once after one of their 4 gigs in York. Now the Beatles played at a theatre that used to be nearby, and they were a support acts for people like Helen Shapiro and Roy Orbison. They did one of the gigs without John Lennon because he'd lost his voice. Over on the right, we've looped round. We can see Fishergate Poston Tower again on the right with its open day. Then we're going to cross the River Foss, and on the other bank of the river we can see the castle wall again, and the big brick building which Duke Turnpin was held a prisoner in, now the Castle Museum. So we're recrossing the River Foss, and it's just south of here where the Foss meets up with the Ouse. And the 2 rivers, then often the water backs up and floods the city, including this car park on your left, which was underwater in February. So there's some more great river views now as we go over the bigger river. So the River Ouse, left is downstream, right is looking towards town. Enjoy the view as we go over. Catch boats up and down the river. You can do a nice cruise. You can do a nice walk as well on the footpaths. If you're doing the full city walls, you have to cross the river like we've just done and get onto the walls on your right. And this is where there used to be a second York Castle. It was burnt down a year after it was built, burnt down by the Northern rebels who were opposing William the Conqueror. So later on the city walls were extended out here, and that's what we see on the right nowadays. Straight in here, front of us, a street line with bunting that we normally go down, but we're not today, unfortunately, due to the... Are we? All right, okay, we haven't been. Thank you, James. So we're going to go down, as it turns out, we're going to go down Bishop Thorpe Road now. So this is often voted High Street of the Year, coolest place to live and York's best kept secret. And if you want to explore it for yourself, so we have a bus stop here, and another one coming up in a moment. This is where the locals come to do their shopping, and their eating and drinking. So it's York's best kept secret because not many tourists get out this way. But now you know about it, you can. Now it's along here that we've also got York's smallest house. A bit of a treat for you. It's coming up on the left between 76 and 78 in a very narrow gap, just as wide as a door. So 76 is coming up on your left now. If you look down the gap just after it, there's another house in the gap, and that is on your left now where that black door is. There's another house all by itself, York's smallest house. Now, straight ahead of us is one of York's chocolate factories, as it used to be, and on the right of us a Methodist church from Victorian times. church. So, as we head out of town now, we're going to be taking you towards one of our old chocolate factories, the old Terry's factory, where for many years all the Terry's chocolate oranges were made. So York has a long history of chocolate, which is why we've got attractions like the Chocolate Story and the Cocoa Works, both of which you can get a discount with your bus tickets. And all these discounts are printed off on your bus ticket now as well, so you can see the full list and get reminders from me if you're not sure. So there are two big names, Rowntree's and Terry's. Rowntree's on the other side of town invented things like Kit Kats, Aeros, Smarties, After Eights, the famous Yorkie bar, fruit pastels. And Rowntree's started out where Pizza Hut is nowadays, with a little shop selling tea and coffee and drinking chocolate back in the days when chocolate was a drink. And all those free drinks, including tea and coffee, very exotic back then. You can't grow them in Britain, so very exciting luxury items they were, but you had to pay for them. Chocolate was very expensive when it was first turned into solid chocolate as well. In fact, you'd have to work at Terry's for a week before you earned enough money on your wages to buy a single box of chocolates. Altogether, chocolate was the second biggest source of employment in the city, the biggest source of jobs for women. 60% of the workforce were female, including the mother of the local comedian Frankie Howard. He used to live nearby, his mum worked at Rowntree's. The factory we're going to go past is Terry's, where all the chocolate oranges were made for many years, as well as Terry's Old Gold and York Fruits and Easter eggs. And down the street to the left of us, the first glimpse of the chocolate factory now. And a big brown building with a clock tower. Lots of new houses been built in front of the factory. The factory itself is now full of flats as well. So if you keep looking over your left shoulder through the gaps in the trees, you'll see the old Terry's factory where all the chocolate oranges are made. But also on our left, we're coming up to York Races. There are horse racing events being held here today. It is very busy, and we haven't been able to get down here earlier in the day, but we are now. So you might see some of the horse racing going on if you glance to your left. You can certainly hear lots of cheering, so there must be some horses on the way around or something. Yeah, you can see them in the distance. So as you can see, very busy today. It was also very busy in the 1980s when Pope John Paul II visited York Races. That was not to watch the horses there, that was to hold a mass for 200,000 people. Buffalo Bill and the Wild West Show came to York Races in 1904. That was on July the 4th, Independence Day. When York floods, this area of low land to your left, the racecourse also floods quite a lot. In the year 2000 it was all underwater. Boats and jet skis sailing on it. When the weather's a bit drier, they have rock concerts out here. We've got the Human League in a couple of weeks. They have sporting events, fairs and circuses, but for many years it's also where you come to watch a public execution. Of course they don't do that now, but for hundreds of years they did. And Dick Turpin was the most famous person to be executed, and that was amongst the trees on your left in 1739. Executed in his best coat and shoes that he bought specially. After his hanging, his body was taken down, put on display in a local pub, because they didn't have things like Sky Sports in pubs back then. And then his body was stolen the night it was buried, and it was 3 days after his death before his body was found again, carted through town in triumph by his friends, reburied in the graveyard that we saw earlier. This house on the right, on a little island, all by itself, a triangular-shaped bit of land surrounded by road. 100 years ago, it would have been surrounded by tram tracks instead. The trams used to go up and down this road to the right of us that we're going to go and take us back into the town centre eventually. Along the main route into York for 2,000 years, the main route in from the south, following the path of the old Roman road, following in the footsteps of all of the visiting royalty. Now, because we're following the old Roman road, and the Romans used to bury their dead outside their cities along their main roads, lots of Roman remains turn up in people's gardens when they're digging around on the back border. And a few years ago, it's about 15 or 16 years ago now, 80 Roman gladiator skeletons turned up in people's gardens. 45 of these skeletons had had their heads chopped off in the Roman arena, and some had even got lion bites on the bones. So there's some very bloodthirsty games going on in Roman York, but nobody's quite sure where, because the Roman arena's never turned up. Certainly would have been one, because York was a very important Roman town visited by emperors, including the first African Roman emperor, Septimius Severus, who ran the entire empire from York for 3 years, used it as a base to attack Scotland, and ended up dying in the city of old age, one of the few Roman emperors to achieve that. His son was the tyrant Caracalla, who was proclaimed emperor in York. And 100 years later, another emperor was proclaimed in York, and that was Constantine, who Constantinople is named after. And Constantine was the chap who spread Christianity throughout the Roman Empire. So these days, there's a modern statue of Constantine outside York Minster, on the spot, roughly, where he was proclaimed emperor all those years earlier, when there wasn't a minster there, but a Roman fortress headquarters instead. And outside the minster, part of the Roman fortress HQ can be seen. A massive Roman column was found underneath the minster 50 years ago and re-erected back outside. Straight ahead of us is Micklegate Bar Tower, the fourth of the 4 main towers in the city walls, this being the main entrance for all the royalty being admitted into York over the years, including most recently King Charles III. It's also where the heads of traitors would be put on spikes, the most famous being Richard of York, who gave battle in vain during the Wars of the Roses. His sons would later become King Edward IV and Richard III, due to Richard of York's claim to the throne. On the left of us is an Art Deco cinema from the 1930s, one of our original Odeon buildings. It's a listed building now. The Bar Convent Museum is on the right at the crossroads, not open on a Sunday because it's a convent, but it explains some of the difficult history of being Catholic in the city, especially around the time of Guy Fawkes 500 years ago. Guy Fawkes being another famous person from York. On the wall on the left is a big green beetle, a tansy beetle. A very rare kind of beetle that live on the banks of the River Ouse. So York's Victorian railway station now coming into view. A beautiful bit of Victorian workmanship, all those arching glass roofs. It's not the first station we've had though. There used to be a station on the right, where you can see 2 massive archways that were hacked into the ancient walls to let steam trains in. The station used to back onto the river, as one driver discovered in 1871 when he put the brakes on and pushed 23 wagons of coal into the River Ouse. So they clearly needed a bigger station, and here on the left, this station opened in 1877, and back then that was the biggest station in the world. It's not anymore, but still got Britain's longest curving platform, It's still got its old Victorian footbridge and tea rooms and signs and clocks. So nothing stopping you going in the station, having a wander around, soaking up that old atmosphere. Onto the end of the station platform was also built the station hotel, which we see on our left at the moment. I'll close here for a few minutes. The others, for various reasons, not running at the moment, so we've only got one bus an hour at the moment. But do check with our sellers for any updates about that later on. We'll hopefully get a second bus up and running again quite soon. On the right of us, a great big brown building, the old railway office, nowadays a 5-star hotel. And we're coming up to a stop for the Railway Museum, famous museum in York, free to get in. And if you're going to the Railway Museum, please ring the bell now, because we're just coming up to the bus stop now, although if these buses don't move, we're going to be stuck. But so we're just entering the Memorial Gardens, and the Memorial Gardens were laid out by Sir Edwin Lutyens. He's the same chap who built the Cenotaph in London. And the War Memorial to the right of us is also in honour of the First World War soldiers, but in this case the First World War soldiers from York. Edwin Lutyens designed the Memorial Gardens, and he also did the Thiepval Memorial on the River Somme in mainland Europe as well. So this is the stop for the Railway Museum. It's a short walk ahead of us from here. And at the Railway Museum you can see a vast collection of trains, including the Japanese bullet train. And you can also find the Duchess of Hamilton, a beautiful red engine. You can also find the Mallard, which broke the steam speed record in the 1930s, and incredibly still holds it today, 126 miles an hour. Below us on the right, the Roach train that takes you from the Minster to the Railway Museum. So another way of getting down to the Railway Museum, if you're visiting it later, you can either catch our bus or you can catch the road train at the Minster. And that's very close to two of our bus stops as well, as we will see in a moment, because we're coming up to those next. So once we go over the river, we'll be at bus stop 21 for the Yorkshire Museum and the Riverside in the Museum Gardens. Get your cameras ready for more great views of the river as we go over this bridge. Right in the centre of town now. Lots of nice places to have a drink by the river, including the cottage on your left, the Victorian toll booth on the right. You can catch boats from the jetty on your left, or do a nice walk. On the right of us is the beautiful medieval Guildhall overlooking the river. Below us on the left is a ramp and staircase that take you down to the riverside. So we're approaching stop 21 now. The street on your right will take you right into the centre of town, near to Betty's Tea Room. And on the left of us, the gates to the Museum Gardens, where you can visit the ruined Roman fortress, the beautiful Gothic archways of St Mary's Abbey, and the ruined medieval hospital. You can visit all those free ruins for free. So if you do want this bus stop, please ring the bell now, because we're coming up to it. The stop for the Museum Gardens, stop 21. And also go through the gates on your left to the Yorkshire Museum. See prehistoric skeletons and various artefacts from Roman, Viking and medieval York and Yorkshire as well, including a statue of the god Mars and a massive Roman mosaic floor. Straight in front of us is York Minster, our most famous building now. We're looking at its west front. In the west front is a statue of Queen Elizabeth II, the most recent addition to the Minster, just added before Christmas and unveiled by King Charles III. On the right of us is York Theatre Royal, the oldest theatre outside London. On the left of us, beyond the car park wall, is the King's Manor, now part of the university's history department, but originally a Tudor mansion. And we're coming up to stop number 1 now, and this is where you can get to York Art Gallery on the left, or the city walls on the right, or through the archway on the right to York Minster. So lots of great things nearby. One of our most central stops, stop number 1. If you started here an hour ago, you don't have to get off. It was executed not long after that little haunting, which is believed to haunt the King's Manor, one of the many ghost stories in York. Now, if you're looking for the alternative part of York's shopping and eating, then this is a great place to start. Gillygate. As we go along it, we're just about to pass a meditation centre on the right, the blue shop, and then the white shop's got a little white cat sitting on the ledge, level with us on top deck on the right now, a little white cat. And that's one of 25 cats on the York Cat Trail. You can pick up a leaflet that tells you where they all are and enjoy tracking them down. You're only going to see 4 or 5 from the bus, many others, 25 altogether. Leaflet will tell you where they all are, or you can track them down online, the York Cat Trail. So along this street you can find vegan food, fair trade goods, vinyl records, vintage collectibles, crystals and dream catchers. So lots of things that you would probably struggle to find in the rest of town, to be quite honest. So it's a good place to start for the alternative and independent part of York's shopping. Gillygate it's called, between stop number 1 and stop number 2. As we go around this corner, you'll shortly get a great view of our city walls on the right of us. And you'll see the city walls on the right stretching from Robin Hood's Tower on the corner to Monkbar Tower in the distance. So Robin Hood's Tower is the round one to the right, slightly different colour because the Victorians restored it. Nobody really knows why it's called Robin Hood's Tower, but it's had the name for 500 years at least. Over on the left are some university buildings looking a bit like Hogwarts, but this is St John's University, dating from Victorian times. One of 2 different universities in the city. And over on the right, you can see a big grassy slope that the city walls are built on. That's the Viking defences, and then the stone medieval wall was added centuries later. And just beyond the stone wall on the right, we're shortly going to get a great view of York Minster, shining in the sun just beyond the city walls. So we'll take it slowly past this gap on the right now, give you a brief but wonderful view of the Minster. Get your cameras ready, take your pictures quick. The great east window on the end nearest to us is the size of a tennis court. So you can of course visit the Minster. You can do everything from the bottom of the crypt to the top of the central tower. You can see most of the country's medieval stained glass inside that one building as well as ruins of the Roman fortress down in the crypt and outside. On the left of us, abandoned graveyard. Used to be a church on this corner, but the graves are all that's left now after the church was demolished. And if you look up the street to the right of us, Monkbar Tower with the Wild Men of York standing on the top of there. They're life-size, those statues, and they come to life as well and drop rocks on you. That is if you attack the city, so as long as you don't do anything suspicious when you go that way, you'll be okay. The street on the right takes you to the Victorian Hospital that's now flats. Number 44 on the right, the big white door frame level with the tree, is where George Hudson used to live, the man who brought the railways to York and later fell into disgrace. Below us on the left, in a moment, we pass an Elizabethan style garden, just beyond this white van on the left, beyond the black and gold gate, a knot garden. But it is a garden, it's a knot garden, so it is a garden. So while you're in York, you've got 2,000 years of history around you. There's also 2,000 listed buildings, so there's quite a lot to have a look at when you're out and about. The history of York starts in the year AD 71, when the Roman army marched into the area between our two rivers, and they were looking for a place to build a fortress, and the area between our rivers was perfect for that, because there's no town in those days. There was no Minster, there was no such place as York, or any such word as York for that matter. The Romans built a fortress and later a town called Eboracum between the two rivers, and below us on the left you can now see the River Foss, which is the smaller of our two rivers. It meets up with the River Ouse south of the city, and then they flow out to the sea. And in Roman times, then you could get all the way to the rest of the Roman Empire by boat. And you could bring things back into York, like wine and olives and grapes. Lots of stuff you couldn't get in Britain in those days because there wasn't a supermarket on the right like there is now. Watch out for low-hanging trees as we pass Sainsbury's car park. You're so busy looking at the car park you won't see a tree coming to wallop you. When they built the car park in the 1980s, 500 skeletons were found underneath. It turned out to be the site of a medieval Jewish cemetery. So back in those days, there was no such word as York, as I mentioned earlier. And in those days, York was Eboracum under the Romans. Later became Anglo-Saxon Jørfavik and Viking Jorvik, and it's all been York for 1,000 years, half its history. Over on the right of us is St Cuthbert's Church, mentioned in the Domesday Book. Now, the church we see on the right now is a bit later than that. It's 1300s, this church, or 13th century, I'm not sure which. But a bit after the Domesday Book. But there was an earlier version of St Cuthbert's standing here in those days. When the Domesday Book was written, it mentioned several churches in York, 1,400 houses. It also mentions our famous street, the Shambles, the one that looks like Diagon Alley that we're going to go past in a minute. But one interesting thing that is left out of the book is the fact that there's meant to be a secret passage, or a rumour anyway, not a fact. A secret passage from the church, tunnelling under the road we're on, and taking people to the pub on the left. The pub on the left is one of the most haunted buildings in York, the Black Swan. There's a man in a bowler hat haunts the bar. A ghostly lady who sits by the fireplace, and a pair of disembodied legs that walk about all by themselves. So a wonderful atmospheric place with tapestries on the wall if you fancy having a drink in there later, if you're brave enough. Stop number 5 is outside it. And stop number 6 is round this next corner as we get into the very centre of town. And from stop 6 there's lots of great places that you can visit and get money off with your bus ticket. So stop number 6 is the one you want for the shops and the shambles and the markets. But it's also the one you want for money off at the chocolate story, the Merchant Adventurers Hall, the Roman Bath Museum, Drake's Fish and Chips, York Gin, and a few other places nearby as well.